you were born James Newell Osterberg back in Michigan.
Yeah.
You started a group called the Iguanas. You were the drummer. That's how you got the name Iggy. You became Iggy Pop.
I actually named my first performing group was called the Megaton 2. I named it myself. I was very impressed with the power of atomic energy. I was 14 years old, and it was myself and a guitar player got together for a school talent show. Just the two of us. We did What Did I Say, instrumental version by Ray Charles, and a Sandy Nelson drum solo song. But then my first proper band was the Iguanas.
Yeah. But
I thought the Megaton too was ridiculous.
Well, we all know you as Iggy Pop, the stage performer, but your real name's James Osterberg, and you're known as Jim to your friends and the people you work with. What is the difference between Jim and Iggy?
There are some people who I like to call me Jim. Most people, I just prefer it when they call me Iggy.
What's the difference between Jim and Iggy?
Well, that's not something I really feel a need to sort of puzzle out.
Yeah. Do you think... Yeah, I mean,
you're not going to get an answer out of me on this one, Paul.
I'll try
Might as well move right along here.
I'll try another way, though. That
right.
Iggy was the performer on stage, the man who gave more than any other stage performer in sort of the history of rock and roll. And James Osterberg was the guy off stage who, you know, when he was with his friends, was was quiet and concerned, etc. What I want to say is, who do you feel predominates inside you more now?
I wouldn't look at it in those terms. I'd simply say that we all, there's never been a human being born who didn't have more than one name. And we are all many different people to the many different people who we encounter.
Yeah, that sounds good. Ever since you shared the same management company back in the early 70s with David Bowie, your careers have been closely followed, in terms of their parallels. But it looks as though now Iggy Pop is soaring up. It seems that now it seems that for instance, David Bowie's musicality is waning and dwindling, and people haven't got much to say about him. Whereas you seem to be, rocketing back now with this new image and this new album, and a very sort of concerted effort. What do you think about what David Bowie's doing now?
That's not for me to say, Paul, really.
But, I mean, your opinion would be interesting.
I haven't seen, I understand he was doing something over at ICA here the other day, which is going to be on TV, I think, probably the night of this broadcast, but I'm going to miss that because I'll be in Switzerland performing. I think that with all performers, the public, and particularly the critical establishment, tends to regard your work in waves. They tend to overrate it when they decide it's good, and they tend to underrate it when they decide it's bad. I think that, as David himself has pointed out, his last studio album is not at all different in arrangement, content, or approach than some of the work for which he received extremely generous accolades earlier in his career. I would say that speaking, I would rather than pick out one part of his work, I would say that lyrically, I've found him one of the most intriguing and engaging of singers of our times. Musically, I find him deft, but not always swinging, but when it swings, it really swings. Depends on which stuff you're talking about. In other words, I prefer the song Station to Station to the song Starman. I've always liked him more for his lyrics than any other aspect of what he's done.
You just brought out your 12th studio album, Instinct, which you say is a culmination of everything you've ever done. Has Iggy Pop's career at last reached its peak?
No, I think I was probably just saying it was the first album I made all by myself where I was sober enough so I could remember everything else I'd done. I sort of, oh God, I used to like that bit on that record, and I don't know, I felt very in control of it. It all came from me playing my guitar, which is which is basically what I've always done. That's where all the Stooges stuff came from too. It's basically me sitting with a cheap guitar in a room, thinking up all this stuff, you know. And then I'll have this drummer that plays like this, and we'll have these big flags on stage, and I'll do this and that. But what it really comes from, basically, it's one guy sitting with a guitar writing stuff. Yeah. I'm basically an author that uses a little different medium than the book form.
Do you write your stuff in a similar way that you perform it? Is it quite fast and spontaneous, or do you like go off to a country cottage and sort of get at one with yourself?
It's even worse than that. It's a constant, ongoing. It's almost a burden, and I'm constantly. It used to be worse. It used to be very bad when I was writing in the late '60s when I was starting. That was the hardest. I would just walk around for days on end trying to think up evocative song titles. No Fun, which is that's a good title. That must have taken me. That must have been a month of thinking.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about something about. A lot of times I would just wander around the streets of Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I'm from, stoned on LSD, for 10 or 11 hours, 5 days a week, which is about as much as I could take it, trying to picture big titles, you know.
Yeah.
I never liked these sort of titles that run off at the, you know, these sort of titles like My Rainy Day Infatuation, or I don't know, you know what I mean, or obscurity in my titles. I liked a title that got to the root of things. That's why I liked I Want to Be Your Dog, you know, or No Fun. Or I was looking for something that described my experience in bold type. And that would transfer, that would come across to other people, so that there was no you wouldn't even have to hear the song to know what it was about. And it was almost like sloganeering. I was interested in politics when I was as a young man, and I was interested in propaganda, sloganeering, you know, all that side, pamphleteering, all that side of things. And I was aware of what the Russians had done with it. I was aware of what the Germans had done with it, and Americans as well. And I used to spend a lot of time coming up with Stooges stage shows in the library of the University of Michigan, you know, which is people wouldn't imagine me there, you know, because a lot of people, I think, assumed that what we did was very Dionysian, spontaneous, kind of a bacchanal, but it never really was. It was always something I thought up. Basically, what I was a young guy who was convinced that the sort of possible lifestyles outlined for me and my society weren't worth living. And so I made a conscious decision to use literate means to break out of those forms and those molds, and to try to lead what I thought would be a superior life, based on success, not in terms of money, but in terms of immortality.
What do you think?
And doing something worthwhile with my immortal soul, and that's creativity.
Looking back on it, what do you think about the lifestyle that you led when it was Iggy and the Stooges?
Terrific, terrific. I don't regret any of the. Obviously, there were mistakes, and there was, you know, as I've outlined myself in book form. In the book I wrote, I Need More, there was filth and degradation, you know, all those things. But that's all part of life. Anyway, it's all part of most people's lives. It's just not as recognized often. You've
still got a very hungry look in your face. I mean, is that still got to be a part of your life, all of that?
What, the filth and degradation? Yeah, or the, yeah, I think those things are important to me. I mean, basically, I'm in rock and roll, which is pretty much a form of pornography anyway, frankly. I mean, let's face it. That's a very honest. That's what they all do. That's a very
honest appraisal of rock and roll. But what do you think of contemporary rock and roll in terms of the other people who purport to be?
In terms of its pornographic value, well, let's see. No. Which one's who's the cutest singer? You know, that's what it all boils down to. Whoever's got the best hair sells the most. You know, basically.